Welcome to beautiful Igls in Austria. We're just above the Olympic city of Innsbruck in the Tyrol region of the Austrian Alps, and we are ready for the 7th Wiesmann World Cup in men's skeleton. Hello everybody, welcome on a beautiful sunny morning to a beautiful location. I'm Martin Haven, sitting alongside me is Canadian slider Melissa Hollingsworth. Melissa, this Igls track is one that so often is used to teach young sliders because it is fairly straightforward, but it's very quick as well, so there's a lot of challenges for the sliders.
Yes, all week we've been seeing some 8, 9, 10-year-olds go down the track, run the race. We're going to see them in the future Junior Olympics and Olympics to come. It is a pusher's track. You can see Tretiakov, the push monster, has the record here. It's fairly flat at the start, and the unique thing about Igls is that it's very easy to get down, but if you make a mistake anywhere on this track, it's difficult to find that time anywhere else. It's going to be hard to find the mistakes the sliders are making, but when you're on that sled, you feel them. Subtle little entries, if you're too early or slightly too late, it will definitely be cutting your time down the track. The most critical part is corner 9 right here, where you'll see a definite wave and sometimes see sliders flop out and skid in that long straightaway before you come into 10, and now this is the highest speed on the track, where these sliders today with this weather, we should see them over 120 kilometers an hour.
Well, very quick indeed, over 80 miles an hour down towards the bottom. And then one of the most dangerous points for me is this braking area in a corner and then another corner into a tunnel as you're desperately trying to slow down. It's not an easy end to, not an easy track. It's very technical in nature, this place. Martin Stukurz, our World Cup points leader. Then Alexander Tretiakov, who started the season with such a burst of form. Stukurz overhauled him once we got to Europe. Thomas Stukurz, his brother. The brothers have had 2 1-2 finishes in the last 3 races. The Latvians really hitting form at the moment. And Matt Antoine of the USA lying 4th in the World Cup rankings ahead of the top Canadian, Johnny Fairbairn. Well, so much going on here today. And a lot of it is to do with these rankings, because this will be the final day for men's skeleton before places for the Olympic Games are set. Well, Martin Stukurz, barring some horrible accident, is absolutely set in stone. He's gonna go no matter what. But there's a lot of athletes, a lot of nations where maybe the possibility of an extra sled, an extra place is still up for grabs.
It is, and at this level, when you're on the World Cup scene, everybody is almost the same physically, and their skill sets are the same, and it comes down to that mental game. And today, it's a whole other mental game, because it's not just the World Cup race, it is the race to the Olympic Games.
Well, we just saw Frank Rommel warming up. He'll be going off second. First on the ice will be Sergei Chudinov, and then Martin Stukurz, Thomas Stukurz, and Alexander Tretiakov. Tretiakov was the European champion, winning this race last year ahead of the 2 Stukurz brothers. I beg your pardon, Martins was the champion. Tretiakov went on to win the World Championship later, but those 3 were the podium finishers. We've got 28 sleds in the field, so first business will be to cut them to the fast 20. First man on the ice here in Igls to get this 7th World Cup race underway is Sergei Chudinov, the 26-year-old from Russia. Chudi, another big, strong starter on a track that will favour the quick starters. 4.94, the record is 4.78, set by his teammate Alexander Tretiakov back in 2008, Melissa Hollingsworth.
That's a long time for that record to be standing, and perhaps we'll see it broke today.
Well, fast ice, it was a little frosty overnight. The women raced in the evening, the men trained at this time of day, but the track was not quite as cold during training.
Everything's looking very smooth for Chudinov to this point, and we may see him have a great result today, especially coming out of 9 like that, because he already has his Olympic spot. There's no worries, no extra mental game for him at all. This is just runner testing and building that confidence as he goes into his home Olympics.
118.7 kilometers an hour down at the bottom, 74 miles an hour, a 53.72 slide. I think we're going to see a few that are quicker than that. The speed, I thought, was a little lower than we might have anticipated, maybe 3/4 of a mile an hour slower than we thought we might see. But the critical parts of this track, the start area, and then really the bottom part is all stitched together with corner 9. But another impressive looking start.
Yes, love this slow motion camera. You're wanting to be as efficient as possible as you load on that sled quickly, and all of your force going forward, not to the side, because you potentially could pop out of the groove, which then would create complete chaos. Here's corner 9. Have a look. He stays on that right-hand side. Very difficult to do. He's still steering. You can see his leg pushed down in the sled, that right leg. But no skids, no hits for the wall.
No big smile either, so not overjoyed with that. Well, let's see what Germany's Frank Rommel can do. German skeleton struggling a little against the onslaught of super fast starters, particularly the Latvians and the Russians. Rommel, 30 years old. The old man, he always says. In fact, he's not even 30 yet. The old man, 29. Jeez.
And Frank's not one of the strongest starters, but he is one of the best drivers in the field, and he handles the groove well. That groove has been pulling everybody to the right, even the women's field yesterday, and he was prepared for that.
Quarter of a second down on Chudenov at the start. And this is such a short track, Melissa, just over 1,200 meters. As you say, very technical, so it's hard to find a big slice of time. It's very easy to give away a big slice of time, though.
Exactly, and on this Igls track, you have to make your move and then let the sled go. If you're constantly working all the way down the track, you will be depleting your speed. Frank is one of the best. Look how smooth he is at a corner 9, just trying to lean off that wall a little bit.
Quicker than Chudenov at that stage. Chudy 1:18.7, Rommel a full km/h quicker. So he's going to narrow the gap a little from 41 to maybe 0.3 of a second. Yeah, there you go, 3,300s. Another 400 or 500 meters, and he might have been a little closer.
I'm definitely happy to see that they're not flying around that last corner into that wall, and they have quite a bit of snow in there, keeping these athletes safe.
They worked hard on the start grooves this morning as well, repairing some footmarks that have been left by the taxi bobs yesterday evening. You're kind of sprinting and then like diving into the pool, but with your surfboard with you almost. It's a very interesting technique.
It is, but look at Frank and how streamlined, perfect. His body is perfect for this sport because he's fairly slim, aerodynamic. That's very important. Your body, instead of a bobsled being the vehicle that is transporting you down the track, it is your body.
The body is very visible to the air, and the longer and leaner you are, the better the air likes you. It's all about cutting down the drag. Well, next up, first 3 starters from Russia, Germany, and Japan. Hiro Takahashi, firmly in the top 10 in the world rankings. He's 9th place at the moment. Had a really strong season so far. His worst result has been 13th place.
Every athlete has a unique starting style. You have that option of using the right or the left groove, and most athletes will choose that depending on their own technique of whether they want to run over top of the groove, the sled being in that runner, or if they have a bad load, they'll maybe want the opposite runner in that groove so they don't pop out on the load. And sometimes it's just the coach's decision if the groove is pulling them a different direction of which groove to use.
One of the reasons that we have 4 runners going down before the competition is to try and alert people to the fact that one groove or another might be directing you in directions you don't want. You still have to work with it yourself. Lots of footwork going on here, which is great for a dancer, not so great for a skeleton slider.
No, I'm surprised that he's having the issues that he is having on this track right now. He's kind of late in all the corners, which is pushing the pressures late in the corner, and it's setting him up poorly for the next corner.
That's because I mentioned his worst result was 13th. I wonder if that's the hex already in place. He was working hard, though. He was doing a lot of steering, and that suggests to me perhaps that he's not quite comfortable with the way the track is feeling this morning.
That, or he took a big risk in his setup, because you can choose different runners, different cuts depending on the ice, or you can put rock in your runner, so that gives you more or less control.
When she says rock, she doesn't mean rocks. She means that it's like a rocking chair. You can make the contact patch that's on the ice smaller by increasing the arc of the runner underneath the sled. And again, coming in from the right-hand side as he sees it. So there's all sorts of different techniques going on here at the start.
Yes, and he had some trouble loading. He actually hit his knee first, so he might have ran that sled a bit too far for how fast he is capable of running. Late coming out of the Kreisel, drifting to the right, not where you want to be going when you're going into a big right-hand corner. You want to be more on the left side.
Athlete and sled are weighed together to make sure they are within the legal maximum and minimum weights. Next up is our start record holder, our world champion Alexander Chechikov, European champion on this track last year, silver medalist behind Martin Stukurz. Ooh, 482, that's a big start from him. He always likes to lay the challenge down for the Stukurz brothers.
And another important part is the 50.9 kilometers an hour, that velocity, because that is how fast he is going into that first corner. Sometimes that start time isn't the critical portion, it is more that kilometers per hour.
It's like a drag race, it's not how quickly you leave the lights, it's how quickly you keep leaving, how much the acceleration builds. This acceleration building well here, 99.6, quickest speed we've seen so far. 120.3 kilometers an hour. Now this is starting to look more like it's 75 miles an hour and still accelerating hard all the way down to a 53.04 slide. That puts Alexander Chechikov in the lead for at least the next 2 minutes.
That was a great run. We saw very minimal work from Chechikov, so he looked very comfortable with his setup this time around, unlike St. Moritz, where we did see him with his legs all over the place and the sled skidding, getting things sorted out for Sochi. Very relaxed. You can see his body is being the shock absorber. Look at the head come up a little bit, dropping out, but handles it very, very well.
And the direction changes in this lower labyrinth are really quite extreme. 75 miles an hour and accelerating fast through those corners. There is our race leader then, Alexander Chechikov of Russia, the reigning world champion. Winner on this track last year, as he has been a number of times, as Martin Stukurz, the European champion on this track last year, and he is our World Cup leader with wins in Calgary, in Winterberg, in St. Moritz, and a second win in St. Moritz last weekend. So he has been undefeated since the tour returned to Europe after Christmas.
You can see that green light with the clock counting down. Once they clear the track for you, you have 30 seconds to get across the first timing eye. That starts your run time.
4:86, 400ths of a second behind Alexander Chechikov. And this is the battle that everybody comes to see in the men's skeleton. Identical time, identical speed out of the first corner. He's a little heavier of an athlete than Chechikov, and that load perhaps just puts that extra fraction more momentum into the sled. Again, speed a fraction higher, Melissa, so he's closing down.
Oh, and a bump out of Kreisel. We're not used to seeing Martins make those little mistakes like that. We'll have to see if he can find a little bit more speed on this track to catch up to Chechikov, because he is a little behind, I think, with his speed there.
Speed is the same as Chechikov. 121.1 there is very quick indeed. He's going to accelerate into the lead. He was only 200ths behind, and he'll be a 10th in front. Not even as much as that, 400ths of a second. Well, he has the lead. Last year he won by 0.75 of a second, which I recall was one of the smallest winning margins of his season last year. Habitually it was over a second in front of anyone. But yeah, he found the pace in the lower labyrinth after that mistake.
Wow, and currently sitting in first. If he hangs on to that, he is still in the running for that Triple Crown as well. He has a great line, and Kreisel has a little bit of a dip. You want to have this height right here so you can shoot out, but he falls off the corner slightly, bumps the wall. Anytime you tap the wall, that is hundredths, sometimes tenths of a second. but he handles it well, doesn't overcorrect it and set himself off into a skid.
John Morgan down there chatting to Thomas Dukos. We'll hear from him as likely as not at the end of the race. And Tomas Dukos, and at the top of the track is brother Thomas, bronze medalist here last year in the European Championships. Brothers have had 1-2 finishes in the last 3 races. Very strong indeed, lots of Latvian fans.
Thomas and Martins work very closely together. Every race, they are training similar, comparing their notes. They watch all of the training as well. Even though they're the best in the world, there's something to learn from every athlete that goes down every track.
5 seconds flat, so we've had our big starters, Alexander Tretiakov, Martin Dukos, and now Thomas Dukos, all within a few hundreds of each other. Good first corner momentum as well. Just a little shy of what we saw from his brother, Martin Dukos, the race leader.
You can see him make slight corrections. These sleds are flexible, so we steer with our shoulders and our knees. You also, if you get yourself in a little bit of trouble, you'll see a toe come out to do a slight correction. This is a smooth run. You can see that toe came out to just, like a rudder, straighten himself out.
About 1 kilometre an hour down in all the speed traps so far, and drifting further away. This is not one of Thomas's better runs, over half a second behind, and he's in 3rd place at the moment, but 7/10 back. That is a big margin. But again, habitually, as soon as Martin Dukos comes down, it changes the playing field for everybody else. The dynamic, everybody else is very close. Dukos here, Thomas and Sergei Chutinov are only 100th apart, but then suddenly you get Martin Dukos and Alexander Tretiakov, who just launched themselves so far ahead of the field.
It is. It's almost like there are 2 different fields within one race when it comes down to these guys. But, you know, when it comes to Sochi, Thomas has been sliding very well there, and he is my pick as that dark horse. I have to say that right now.
All right. Well, I think the bookies will probably argue that A. Dukos is going to be the favourite, but you're right. I think Thomas will be worth putting maybe not the house on, but some money. He is in 3rd place behind Martins and Alexander Tretiakov in 2nd. First 6 of our 28 sliders have completed this Igls run, the first of 2 heats in the Skeleton Men's World Cup. Alexander Krökel of Germany is next up. He's lying in 8th place in the World Cup, and a slew of 7th, 8th and 9th positions this season after a disappointing start in Calgary. Only 18th place. It's a bit of a shocker to start the year.
Complete silence to all the cheering on the sidelines from his fellow German fans.
He left that a long time. He only had 5 or 6 seconds left on the clock before he blasted out from the block, so he was just taking those extra few moments to prepare yourself. Some athletes will do it while they're waiting, some will do it when they're actually stripped down and on the ice. That little mental preparation is so important, Melissa, because after the sprint, you've got to be just this oasis of zen, calm and control.
It is a very unique sport where you have to blast off that block and be as aggressive and intense as possible to being as relaxed and calm and focused when you're sliding.
I've been a bull rider, but in reverse. The calm is when you're in the pen, and then the chaos when they open the gate. Here it's the opposite. 1:19.8 is good speed from Krökel, but he's only in 5th place at the moment. How close will he get? 53.98 slide leaves him almost a second behind the race leaders. But again, this is now about the battle for 3rd place, and he is 2/10 away from a medal. Actually, honestly, nearly 3/10 away from a medal, so this is not going to be a big race weekend, he says, for Alexander Krökel.
You can just see that disappointment all over his face. I think he's been carrying that all season long. See his elbow out a little bit and his head leaning? You know he's doing quite a bit of work to try and get that sled where he wants to, and that's why we're not seeing him up in the top ranks like we're used to seeing.
Almost like a Cresta slider, really wrestling the sled. And this is all about subtlety and nuance, and he's really fighting it, and that's never going to be quick. And sideways, again, that's never going to be quick.
Not used to seeing the Germans in that type of form.
Yeah. And of course, this is not just an average race, this is the last race. The only race now that counts after this is going to be Sochi. Eric Nielsen of Canada, the Canadians will all travel home after this weekend is completed for training camp back in Calgary in Canada. Preparation for the games. So Melissa Hollingsworth, you and your teammates going to be back in familiar surroundings, and that little cocoon around you will hopefully send you off to the games in the best possible state of mind.
Well, this sport is up to hundreds, and we are looking to go home and train in that last final Olympic prep camp so that we can be fast and fit and healthy and refreshed when we're standing on that block in Sochi. And Eric is one of our Canadian Olympic members that was announced in December. He is going to his very first Olympic Games. So right now he's just trying to earn points so he has a better start number in Sochi. And a bit of a skid out of corner 9. And head is up. Now this track is going fast compared to the top portion, so you need to stay low and aerodynamic through this part.
And the significance of the head is up means he's trying to recalibrate, isn't he? Because what he was expecting to be happening isn't happening, and so now you've got to get back in control, get back ahead of the sled, and that's where the subtlety goes, and you have to really recalibrate your bearings. 117.8 down at the bottom, only 73.2 miles an hour. And Eric will be over-thrilled with that run. It drifted away a little.
Saying hi to his wife Heather at home, his family back in Kelowna. Have a look at his head kind of chattering there. Shows that the ice might be a little bit rough today. He's trying to absorb it. Sled comes out sideways. That back bumper's taking the hit. It's always better when your bumper takes the hit instead of your shoulder. Eric's a big guy, and so sometimes when he hits the wall or the sled hits the wall, his body will follow through and get quite a few burns on the shoulder.
Eric Nielsen of Canada has just gone down, and next up is his teammate John Fairbairn. And the glowing brain on the helmet, reflecting the mispronunciation of his name so often as Fairbrain. I'm not quite sure how you can do that too easily, but there you go. Johnny Fairbairn looking for another strong result here. 5th in the World Cup standings this season. What a year he's been having.
Absolutely fantastic for Johnny. His first World Cup podium last week in St. Moritz, just on that climb all the way to Sochi. And again, another first-time Olympian for Canada.
And if you're going to have your best season, the Olympic season is the time to have it. And if you're going to have your best results, the end of the Olympic season going up to the Games is, I mean, it's all starting to peak so nicely for him, and that must just bring confidence.
For sure. And look at him on his sled. He's quiet, he's calm, subtle movements. Again, another very aerodynamic body.
Point 8 back, he started 7th fastest, in 8th place at the moment, but a nice clean exit right down the middle of the straightaway there. 99.5 is good speed, very good.
120.8 at the bottom.
And Melissa, you see that good exit pays you dividends all the way down the run. And that's a good run from Johnny Fairbairn.
It's right in there with...
He is right in there, Duff Gibson, you're absolutely right. Chudanov, Fairbairn, Krökel, and Thomas Ducours all in the hunt for medals here. 1400s away from a bronze medal.
That's great. I'm sure he's wanting to say hi to his wife, Randy, at home, former skeleton slider for Canada as well. He's running straight and close to his sled. Efficient load. Immediately into form. That takes lots of practice, and we're fortunate in Canada we have a facility called the Ice House, so we get to practice our starts all the time. Kreisel, it's a 270-degree corner. Comes out close to that left wall, perfect form.
Scaring the wall but not hitting it, and that's exactly what you need. Keep the speed alive. Johnny Fairbairn on the weighing scales as Matt Antoine, 4th in the World Cup rankings, with one win and another couple of podiums already this season. It's ready for his first of 2 heats here in Igls in Austria. And again, we talked about Johnny Fairburn having a really strong season. This has got to be Matt's best on the World Cup. 2 seasons ago, had to have major reconstructive surgery, and last year that was still haunting him. This year, though, he is perhaps as good as he has ever been, I think.
And he's the first athlete that we've seen choose to use the left groove, and it seemed to put him into corner 1 just fine.
They spent a lot of time this morning rebuilding the groove, as we said, patching it up with dry ice and slush from the track to make sure that the surface is as smooth and fast as possible.
Great view going into Kreisel. The strategy is to go later than earlier. And sometimes you would think that would be a panic move, but not at all with the way that the ice is built up on the entry. That's the best line to take.
98.4, not great speed. He's got good form, though. 119.2 is getting up there at the moment. In 9th place. See if he can squeeze another spot up. He does. 18th place, 8th place rather. 54.14 slide. So over a second adrift. And a 10th behind Frank Rommel in 7th. So he's got a battle on his hands with Eric Nielsen, who's 200s behind him.
So, jetzt wie gesagt, diese kurze TV-Break, Wolfi.
Looks like Matt is not overjoyed with that run either, kind of walking away from the sled a little.
You need that time after your run to just be a little bit frustrated and figure out what's happened, because there's still 1 run to go. Crosses him pretty abruptly into corner 2, and he has a bit of a wave. But here he is going into that corner 10. They have another roof set in place in case you go too high. He comes around that corner. You want some height, about 3/4, so you can shoot the gap. Crosses him over, and that might be why he didn't have that high speed at the bottom.
Race being led by Martin Stukors of Latvia, Alexander Tretyakov in his shadow, and then the battle for the final podium spot is about 3/4 of a second back. Well, Melissa Hollingsworth, it's one of the strange things about this track is that there is so much variation in what is essentially a fairly simple track to learn because of the nuances, because perfection is required here, really.
Yes, and it is easy to get down this track, but it is hard to be fast, and it comes down to having those perfect entries of where you're not too early and it's pushing you down, and steering at the optimal times, because if you're working the entire way down, you're creating friction and bleeding your speed.
Just saw one of the German bobsledders. They're out and about. The 2-man bobsleigh competition will run in parallel with our skeleton race. So we will have both sets of men competitors on the track during the day today. Beautiful morning this morning, a little bit frosty, but bright and sunny. So the Alps are starting to look a little snowier. I'm not sure if there was actually snow overnight, high up on the peaks, or whether it was just hidden by cloud yesterday, but certainly a beautiful location. And twice this was the venue for the Winter Games. 50 years ago, in 1964, they had the games here. Then they were artificial, they were natural tracks like St. Moritz, but then they had 2 different tracks. One for luge, which is now the road that we go up to the top of the track with the trucks in, and a separate track for bobsled. And in fact, when they built the track here for the 76 Winter Games, it was the first time that both sports had sat down and designed the track together. Stuff you never knew.
That's right.
And it seems now so obvious that such similar sports would always use the same track, but it was never thus. They came from opposite ends of the spectrum and sort of met in the middle. So this was the track that was the first used by all sliding disciplines in a Winter Games in '76. Innsbruck in Austria, high in the Austrian Tyrol, just outside of the double Olympic city. We are at the track at Igls. John Daly of the USA, 11th of our 28 starters in the Wiesmann Men's Skeleton World Cup. Martin Haven, and alongside me, Melissa Hollingsworth, and John Daly, only the fourth man, I beg your pardon, to break that 5-second start barrier, Mel. That's so often been one of his features, is he's such a quick starter.
And it's great that we're seeing him get into that sprint form as we're just outside of the Olympic Games. The Americans, their Olympic team will be decided after this race. They have their Olympic team selection committee all in town. Former bobsledders Jean Racine, who everybody knows who she is back in the US, is in town helping make those decisions. And a little bit of a drop out of corner 9. That means he was definitely letting that sled fly and missed that pressure. Whoa.
Well, pressure's something that we need to talk about as well, because that's what happens when you're in a corner where the centrifugal force pushes you into the ice. 3rd spot for John Daly. That's a very strong run. Yesterday, Katie Uhlaender was talking about having a wild setup and letting it fly and really trying to be aggressive. And it looks like Daly was doing the same there, and that paid dividends.
For sure. Having the strong start at this track was to his benefit, but he was letting that sled fly. Look at him dip, and he's coming straight towards this camera right now on the exit of corner 9, dropping out. And right now he sees that he's a little bit high, and he is trying so hard to get that sled down. There's air between his runners and that ice. What a wild ride for Daly, but it pays off in the end.
Yeah, John Daly goes into 3rd place. 300s ahead of Thomas Ducours. 400s ahead of Sergei Chudanov. So we have a big battle on our hands for podium spots here. And John Daly right in the thick of it. And for him, that would be, if he could stay in 3rd, his best result of the season. What a time to nail one. Christian Bromley, Dr. Ice, his 18th season of sliding. A man who got into skeleton accidentally as an engineering degree. He studied the dynamics of sliding on ice. Figured the best way to learn would be to go and actually do it himself. He was a former world champion, European champion, World Cup champion, and multiple race winner. I don't suppose he ever saw his doctorate leading him in this direction.
Many great things have come out of Kristen's career. Not only, yes, all those accolades and trophies, but his brother is part of the Bromley program with building these sleds. He met his partner, Shelley Redmond, who is also a former world champion, Olympic medalist in women's skeleton, and have their little daughter, Ella, who travels with him. Shelley does all the homeschooling while they're on tour in the winter, so Ella's still getting her education, and a whole other type of education by traveling from different countries every week.
And we talk about the Ducours family, don't we? We've got the 2 brothers. Their father, Dennis, is the coach. He runs the track in Sigulda. He helps design the sleds. And the Bromleys, you've got the 2 brothers designing and building the sleds. Richard is the builder, and Shelley, all, you know, with Ella as well, traveling with parents and grandparents. It's such a tight-knit family unit, and that's just so good for the athlete's comfort zone.
It really is, because that mental state is what's the difference between being on the podium each week and not.
9th place for Kristen Bromley. Not allowed to mention Captain Birdseye, so I won't be saying that. That may be lost on our North American viewers, but British fans will know exactly what I'm talking about. Just a second off the pace. Again, the gap from 1st to 3rd is 0.7 of a second.
Have a look at him coming out of corner 8. Now he's down in this part where you could see the Bromley style with his legs. They come out a little bit. He's just manipulating that sled underneath his body. You can see he's trying to move the sled, but not break his form with his shoulders. He's letting his feet kind of fly, but he's trying to keep those shoulders stuck to that sled for the aerodynamics.
So there is Kristen Bromley lying in 9th place with 12 of our sliders down. Next up, as they say in St-Moritz, Kylie Tress, or Kyle as he was christened. Kyle Tress from the USA, 12th in the World Cup rankings this season. Best result was 5th place in the first race in St-Moritz. Very different track to this one here in Igls. 5:12 getaway for him. Martin-Antoine starting 5:10. John Daly, the real speed merchant at the start here for the US team. And Melissa Hollingsworth You know, a lot of sliders say this track is only 60 meters long because after that you can't make a big impression. So and it is true, you do need starting velocity in a big way.
You do. It's hard to find the speed, but you can definitely lose it with little mistakes here and there. So that's how the race is really won or lost.
A gasp from a slider there as you relate and emote with the athlete on the way down the track. A second away in 11th place at the moment. He had got up to 8th place before that mistake on the split times. Speed dropping away and nicks into 10th place. In fact, tied exactly to the 100th of a second with teammate Matt Antoine. Again, you know, that's all those things make choices so hard for coaches if you're trying to, you know, decide who goes where.
You missed the first push.
That is difficult. You work for 4 years, and then it comes down to this last race. Oh, and his foot is so far sideways.
Final stride, just trying to hurl himself onto the sled.
I think that has to do with his hip positioning, actually, of how far his foot is out to the side. Something's going on with his hips or his back.
Yeah.
Here he is, a little bit too high, just falls off, shoots him right into the wall. He absorbs that hit.
Carl Tress, a real computer whiz. If anybody's computer's playing up, he's the man to see. Great Britain's Dom Parsons at the top of this track in Igls. Great start to the season for Dom. Bronze medal in the season opener in Calgary in Canada. And Mercer Hollingsworth, that's another track that's referred to, like Igls, as a gliders track. Big start, and then carry that speed and try and be as invisible to the air as you can.
Yes, Igls and Calgary are 2 tracks that most of the sliders on tour have had many runs down. 5:02, strong start, but we're used to seeing Dom be in that top 3 or 4 ranking. So 6th, there's, who knows, maybe he's just coming off of his peak a little bit so that he can taper off and be fast for the Olympic Games.
Well, that's the thing now, isn't it? You know, you want to be as strong as you can, but you also want to be as well rested as you can. This is a, you know, real hurry up through Europe. We're racing every single week. They're sliding almost every single day, all of you. And so you've got to find some respite somewhere.
Yeah, and Dom is just a little late in all of the corners here. You can see he's working. His head is moving quite a bit to try and pull the sled off the corners.
Speed's not quite where he'd like it to be. 99 and 119 would be better. He was in 6th place, dropping down to 9th. Maybe down out of the top 10 by the end of the run. He is in 13th place.
Okay.
Couldn't carry that speed.
I'm really shocked by that because Dom has many runs down this track, knows it very well, and he's one of the strongest starters. So maybe, you know, the sled setup just wasn't ideal for the ice because you did see him working quite hard. He might have chose too much control for today.
We now have 4 sliders covered by 400ths of a second.
Oh, and his foot sort of drags behind him on that load. He must have been a little bit awkward. We usually see him run quite a bit further over that crest as well.
The super slow-mo is going to be such a boon for coaches when you're analyzing start technique.
You could see he was trying to pull his sled out of corner 8 too early, got stuck on that wall, late into corner 9. His sled actually skids out from underneath him. It catches down in the belly, so it has nowhere to go but up.
Coming in, skidding around Dom Parsons. 400ths separating him, Matt Antoine, Kyle Tress, and Eric Nielsen. Well, next up is Germany's Alexander Gassner. Like Alexander Krökel, the former junior world champion. Like Alexander Krökel, not finding the form of his career when he could really do with it. Now, he slid in the World Cup in North America, but has not made a World Cup start in Europe so far. So he's been in the Intercontinental Cup and Europa Cup, the 2nd and 3rd tier of sliding, adding to his points tally. And he has now pushed himself back up into being the 3rd German slider.
And a 5:06, that's a strong start for Gassner. And it will be interesting to see what the German Federation ends up deciding for who their Olympic team is, because even though their nation may be earning 3 sliders for the men's program at the Sochi Olympics, it's not necessarily up to the sliding federation. It's a little over their head of where they set those standards so high within the nation for all disciplines, all sports. So it'll go to a bigger selection committee of determining the fate of these athletes.
Well, the top German athlete, Frank Rommel, needs a top 6 finish here. The German criterion are 3 World Cup top 6s. He's had 2 this season. He was 100th out in 7th place in Winterberg. And he said, hopefully with 2 races in St. Moritz, I'll be in. At the moment, Rommel is only 8th. Alexander Krökel is 7th. So even if Krökel gave it away, that wouldn't be enough for Rommel yet. And I don't think Krökel or Gassner or the man he replaced, Christopher Grothair, have anything like what should be their national standard to go to the game. So it could be that the Germans won't have anybody who, in theory, has done enough to represent their country in Sochi. And that would be uncountenanceable for their coaches. They couldn't possibly not send anyone. Or could they?
It would be absolutely disappointing, but you've seen that happen with nations in the past of where they did not make the standard that they set, and so they do not send anybody to the Olympic Games. And working 4 years of your life just to have that start and to have that title of being an Olympian and not achieving it just because of 1/100 over 4 years, it's devastating.
That would be tough beyond measure. Well, the first of 2 Maya sliding brothers that we are going to see today. Raphael is the older of the 2. Benjamin, who'll be racing for Austria in the bobsled competition, is the younger. They have another brother, Sammy, at home, 14. He also slides skeleton. Their father coaches the Austrian bobsled team. So, we're talking about family affairs. Mel, you're on your own. You must feel like Billy No-Mates almost when there's all these tight family groups.
Yes, and Raphael, you could hear the fans cheering so loud. He's here at his home track. That start time, I think, was fairly competitive for Raphael. Shows that he needs that intensity as he stands at the top of the track.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that they are all so young, and physically, of course, they are still developing. You know, they're not going to hit their physical peak until their mid-20s or their later 20s. So these guys are only going to get more physically talented and faster in the finish area, in the start area, rather, and in the finish as a result. 1:19.1 is good speed at the bottom. 74.1 miles an hour. 9th place for Maya. And that is tied with Kristen Bromley, 100th behind Frank Rommel, and just ahead of a tie between Matt Antoine and Carl Tress, with Eric Nielsen and Don Parsons also covered by 400ths of a second behind those guys. So some very, very tight groups in this field. The second run could see a lot of changes, and look, he's pretty happy with that slide.
Oh, and how can he not be on this short Igls track? Just 1,200 meters long, and he is almost 4/10 behind Dukers and Trechikov at the top of the track, and he comes down in 9th spot. He does corner 8 so well that he bumps off the entry of corner 9 slightly, but it sets his line, so he's smooth and low going through there. Going into corner 10, he peaks a bit too early, dips down, comes back around, and you're going to see him bump the wall into 11, but because this is his home track, he's probably done that several times and knows how to handle it, and puts him in 9th spot. Great job, Raphael.
Martin Stukos and Alexander Trechikov lead the field here in Austria, with John Daly lying in 3rd. We've just seen a big slide from one young Austrian, Raphael Meyer, now his teammate Matthias Guggenberger. So Marcus Pence, the former Austrian slider, here yesterday with his young children, come out to watch the action. Let's see if Boogie can put himself firmly into the top 10 as well. Had a huge day for women sliding in Austria yesterday when Janine Flock gained not only her 2nd podium of the season, but her 1st ever at the top level on Austrian ice, and that was a major, major day for her.
Yes, a great day for Austria yesterday, and it would just be the icing on the cake if these 2 Austrian men could also have their best results of the season.
Good speed from him as well, 87.3 miles an hour. The fastest have been just at 1 kilometre an hour, rather faster than that. 7/10 back, he's in 9th place. Teammate Raphael Meyer is already in 9th place, tied with Kristen Bromley. Are we going to end up with a 3-way tie at the bottom? He hasn't got the speeds. 117.3 is not enough. Drifting way out of contention there, Mel. That's a shocker, the second half of his run.
Oh, it really is, because he had such a strong start at the top and being his home track, but there were just... That's also the bad thing about a home track. You are striving for perfection, and it wasn't happening right from the get-go in corner 1, and he was correcting all the way down, bleeding his speed.
Matthias Guggenberger, not overjoyed with that.
Look at that toe comes out for that correction, then the top toe just working all the way down the track. Too much height on the exit of 9. The sled was heading for the wall and then skidding back and forth as a correction. And shoulders up, airflow is coming underneath his body.
Yeah, that was a tough-looking run for Matthias Guggenberger. John Montgomery of Canada. Well, there's a couple of athletes in the field who are going to be hurling themselves down this track like never before, and our defending Olympic champion surely is going to be one of those. This is going to be a classic Monty, go hard or go home. He has nothing to lose at the moment.
Yeah, it's been a tough season for John. He took the risk of building his own sled over the last 4 years because he felt that was what was necessary for him to defend his Olympic title from Vancouver, and just not being able to gel with it, being a one-man show and doing all the testing himself. A 5:03, a strong start. That's exactly what he needs on this short Igls track. Let's see if he can have some clean, effortless lines.
This is, we talk about it so often because the body is so much a part of your sliding, unlike a bobsled, that the sled has to fit you like a glove. It has to be tailored perfectly to you, to work for you, to work with you, not to demand that you do things that it wants, and that's the difficult part.
Things are looking very smooth so far, really clean and effortless, like Johnny can do.
98.3 kilometers an hour. Good speed, 7th place, up to 6 on the split times. This is starting to look a little bit more like the John Montgomery of seasons before, and 8th place at the line. Speed at the bottom was good, 54.02. And that was a slide that probably he's not going to be too disappointed with.
That's right, because there's still room for improvement. He'll be now in the pack with the guys that he's competing with to try and inch his way up. We know his wife, Darla, my former teammate's at home cheering him on, and his mom back in Russell, Manitoba. Well, they're in Winnipeg now, but John's hometown is Russell. Former hockey player, you can see his build is specific to that. Here's Kreisel having that height, very effortless for him to come out. His hip pops up, takes a quick lick, but his runners are going straight. He's close to that left wall, but no skid, no hit. Great run for Johnny.
Keeps the speed on board. John Montgomery lies in 8th place, 300s ahead of Frank Rommel in 9th. And next up is Yuki Sasahara. Behind him is coach Katsuhiro Koshi. Koshi-san, I wouldn't like to even ask him the number of times he's been to this track in his long sliding career. His two Japanese chargers having a really strong season this year. Yuki Sasahara taking over really from Shinsuke Taiyama as Japan's #2 slider. Although Taiyama won the Japanese championship at the beginning of the season in Nagano. He's not been on the World Cup, and part of that may well be Sasahara's starting speed. He's got very good leg turnover. 5:17's not the fastest sprint you'll see. Good momentum. 49.1 kilometers an hour.
Listen to these sleds as it heads down this Igls track, the chattering, the different ways, the different sled designs will have different sounds to them. Bit of a skid and a hit. It's typical of corner 9.
Coming from Japan as opposed to a European country, of course, these tracks will be unlikely to be any more familiar to him than North American tracks. In fact, the chances are he'll probably spend more time coming from the east and sliding in North America and in USA and Canada tracks than he has done in Europe. 16th spot for him. His teammate Hiro Takahashi is 1100s back.
Oh, that puts him just ahead of Guggenberger, which is really disappointing. I'd like to see him get a second run here in Austria, his home track.
Sahara may just do. Of our 28 sleds, only the fast 20 go through, so the guys that are last 2 or 3 in the heat at the moment may be in the danger zone. Well, next up will be the first of 2 Swiss-based athletes, one sliding for Switzerland, the one behind in the blue jacket sliding for Greece. This is Lukas Kummer, a youngster from Laufen. Coach Mickey Grumberger, an Austrian by birth and a real expert on this track, like British coach Andy Schmidt. Well, multiple races here. Schmidt won his World Championship, his World Championship gold medals here. Mickey Grumberger knows the secrets in this track as well. What has he imparted to his young charge, Lukas Kummer?
Look at that leg turnover, that speed, and a 4.99. He dips under that 5.0 mark. Great advantage for Lukas on a short track, lots of experience, and Mickey being Austrian and understanding this track very, very well.
Neat and tidy looking run so far, a little late there. And that's a wake-up call, I guess, for the slider, is when what you expect to happen doesn't, suddenly you're a lot more alert to the track.
Yeah, you're having to rely on that reaction time at these high speeds, so that's when the true slider comes out.
Wild there. Fractional brush with the wall. 1:17.1, not great speed down at the bottom. 20th place at the moment. Really in trouble, Lukas Kummer, on that run. Good start, but the speed was going right from the beginning. Of course, the Olympic qualifying criterion are going to be uppermost in the mind as well. Melissa, that just piles extra pressure on, and you may know that that is not enough.
Heartbreak right there. You can just feel his disappointment.
And every ounce of his being trying to hurl himself onto this track with the best opportunity of performing at the start. Didn't quite land squarely.
And that may have affected his velocity. The start time was great with a 4.99, but I didn't catch his actual velocity going into corner 1. You can see he's just working really, really hard and pushing the pressures late in the corner. You have to be very patient in this sport and feel those high points and then make your move.
Very disappointed, Lukas Kummer, not having a memorable season at all, the Swiss slider. Next up, from Somaden, just down the road from Samaritz, is our Greek athlete, Alexandros Kefalas. Greek father, Swiss mother, which is how he ended up living in Switzerland and sliding for Greece, and being helped out by the Latvian coaches as well. He's part of the Seeker Slider Development Program. First made appearances in the World Cup a couple of seasons ago, really starting to develop strongly. 21st at the start, so already he has got to pass at least a couple of sliders to try and gain a place in this race.
You can see his body being the shock absorber. That head is bouncing up and down, showing the conditions of the ice.
20th place last week in Samaritz, and 18th place as well. His best 2 races of the season in the World Cup. Didn't do the North American races. 1:19.8. He's still in 21st place. needs to find something magical at the bottom to make the race, and he does. Lucas Kummer is out, and Alexandros Kefalas. Maybe the Latvians have discovered the Austrian shortcut down there at the bottom. The Austrians always seem to find something. After it all seems lost down in 10 and 11, the last couple of corners, you can still find speed.
Yeah, 119.9 kilometers an hour in the bottom. That's so impressive. If he can just get a little bit more on his start time. Look at that. He just takes his right hand from the left part of his saddle and goes over to the right side. He doesn't even do the safety crossover. He was running bent over, literally not hanging on to anything for those last couple of steps.
Hoping the sled would stay with him. Getting down there in that lower labyrinth, you see the head getting forced down by the pressure and the bumps. Hard to keep your control of your head, never mind of your sled. Alexandros Kefalas is in the race at the moment. Lucas Kummer of Switzerland is out. Next up, Ben Sanford. Concussed himself, knocked himself out in St. Moritz when he was racing there this week in the Europa Cup. He stayed on in St. Moritz to try and get a couple more races under his belt. Kiwi looking for some crowd support here. Tallest athlete in very many sports you can name. 6'7". One other Kiwi on hand, his teammate Catherine Eustace behind, so the Aussies are banging on the hoardings. Very gentle getaway from Ben Sanford. Leisurely, even by his standards. That was almost walking it off the top.
And this makes me sick to my stomach of the amount of pain that I know that Ben is in. Yes, he went to the Europa Cup in St. Moritz this week just to try and get a few more points so he could improve his start number. He was already selected for the Olympic team for New Zealand based on his results last season of how strong they were, and had a training mishap, hit the roof twice in horseshoe, knocked himself out. I don't feel that this is the safest thing for him to be doing.
But also he's had back problems in the past. I didn't get a chance to catch him this morning. I have a feeling the way he went off so gingerly, I think he's got a real back problem as well. It's a hard thing to crash and not hurt yourself. 56.13 for Ben Sanford. So he is in 22nd place and will not make the race. I think that there's a man who's in a lot of pain probably at the moment. Yeah.
So, jetzt sehen wir den Longinos. Schaut ihn an. Schaut ein bisschen wie der Hugh Jackman aus, hm? Ein fescher Bursche, aber leider heute langsam.
The push was not fast from Ben Sanford, and the run, as a result, was not fast. And if he doesn't need the points, you wonder whether he might have been a little better to be resting up. Maybe he just feels another few practice runs, Melissa, is what he needs. Time on the ice to get back on the horse that threw him.
Yes and no. There's a lot to be said for rest. There's a lot to be said for rest, and hopefully Ben will get that before he goes to Sochi.
I'm sure he'll be resting up now. But I have seen him look better, I have to say. Well, more noise from the Aussies as well now for John Farrow. Recovering from a really bad accident a couple of years ago, left him walking in a cast and sliding last year in a cast. Now starting finally to find some of his old form.
Yes, and he's coming off of great results in St. Moritz. I got to talk to him after the race there, where he said he was just flowing down that track. And when you're smiling and beaming like that, you have all that confidence. It really propels you for the remaining couple of races of the season, heading into the Olympic Games. So I really hope we get to see him there.
Yeah, and particularly Sunday's race in St. Moritz, 12th place. What a diamond run that was.
Oh, for sure. Anytime you're sliding in St. Moritz and your shiny bits are down on the ice, it is fun, regardless of the result. But yes, definitely being that close in the top 10 for Farrow, huge accomplishment.
Doesn't look like he's going to make the cut here, only 22nd place. Again, barely able to walk properly at the moment, never mind really sprint with any power, and that's always going to be such a deficit here.
Yeah, a tragic sprinting accident, not even in sliding. He broke his leg sprinting in Lake Placid, and it's damaged so many of the nerves in that leg. At least he can still be on his mountain bike too. That's his other passion back in Australia. Coming through Kreisel, a little bit of a dip, that's what you want, but his high point, he didn't have enough of a high point, and it just spit him right into that wall.
Well, Ben Sanford already selected. I wonder what the deal is with Australia, whether they'll get a spot, and if they do, whether John will be able to go to Sochi. It's such a tiny discipline within the Australian sporting firmament. It'd be great for his recovery if he could go at least and compete in the games. And of course, the experience, Melissa Hollingsworth, of going to your first games pays dividends if you get to go a second time.
Yeah, for sure. The Olympics are very, very special.
Next up, Ed Smith of Great Britain. Just had a brief chat with him before the start, and he said, I'm going to just go fast here and give it everything. I have absolutely nothing to lose. Not quite as fast at the start still as he would like to be, but he is going to just let this all hang out. That's what head first Ed can produce here.
Ed had great training this week, so if he can translate that into this race, that would be great for his confidence.
5:10 getaway. Let's see if he is going to be smooth or wild down this track. 49.2 is not bad first corner velocity, and at the moment he's having the ideal skeleton slide, Melissa, lying there and letting the sled do it all.
That is the trick, to just help the sled along here and there, not to control it all the way.
26.9, 54 miles an hour. Greatest speed yet. He's gone from 13th at the start to 21st place on the splits. He needs to be really good down the bottom. The speed's not great though. 20th place, he's in the race. Come on, Ed. A little bit more down at the bottom, and 16th position. Now again, Andy Schmitz there, the coach. I think he's got that Austrian shortcut secret. He's giving it away to these boys because he found speed down there at the bottom, like Lizzie Yarnell did in yesterday's second heat, that you thought, oh, where's that come from? 13th at the start, went out to 21st place, and then came back to 16th.
Ed definitely needs to run a little bit further. When you watch Tretiakov, who has push records all over the world, he's taking at least 3 to 5 steps further. And sometimes that's just up to the speed of the athlete. And I think Ed is faster than that. It comes down to muscle memory and that comfort zone.
He's got to push that comfort zone. He's now in a 3-way tie for 16th with Alexander Gassner and Yuki Sasahara. So lots to play for in the second heat. Now from Italy, or for Italy, from Canada, Joe Cecchini. All sorts of cross-border family ties in this sport, aren't there? This young man making his World Cup debut in Europe this season.
Yes, Joe had the opportunity to slide for Italy. His grandfather is from Italy. That's how he has both passports. And a 5:03, that's a strong start for Joe.
So now he's based in Calgary, right? So he can use the same start facility and ice house that you guys do.
He does. I don't know how that works when he's sliding for another country, if he gets the same rates or not, or he has to pay for the international rates. He obviously doesn't receive the same funding as the Canadian team, but definitely reaped the benefits of having great coaching at that time in his career at the Canadian program. He is a cop in Calgary, so he has amazing stories of what his lifestyle is like as he's enforcing the law around the city.
He's seen a few things. 14.8 kilometers an hour. The speed is not there though for Joe Cecchini. And a 55 flat slide leaves him in front of Ben Sanford by 1.1 seconds. But in 24th place of our 25 sliders. and maybe one that he's happy to walk away from as well.
Judging by that reaction, I would have to say that that might be it for him. No Olympic Games for Italy, for Joe Cecchini.
I think that's entirely possible.
Staying low to the sled. You can see his shoulders are down. He's not overreacting. You can see his eyes, but now he's on that skid. The leg comes out to try and straighten himself out. He's looking where he's going, which is a good thing, not looking at that wall.
He is the best-ranked Italian slider in the World Cup. Unfortunately, Joe Cecchini down in 24th place. Martin Stuko's our race leader by a hair's breadth from Alexander Tretiakov. Everybody else is in a different battle for their positions right the way down this field, with so many close fights on. Well, another man who had a big weekend in St. Moritz and really is still bubbling from it is Spain's Ander Mirambel, the man from Barcelona, trains with the Espanyol soccer club in their town. 5:23 getaway, but after two really good days in St. Moritz last weekend in both World Cup races, it's just full of excitement and confidence in the sport again.
Yes, he was absolutely beaming in St. Moritz and glowing, and not just with his smile. I was surprised to see him at the gym in his shorts and how white his skin is. Being from Spain, I expected that he would just have this amazing tan. Ooh, that was quite high.
Wild. He may have gone for a bit of an aggressive setup. Speed is good, 97.4. He's not paid too much for it so far, but at the bottom, 117.5. He's not going to make the second heat here. Only the fast 20 go through. He's in 23rd place. 23rd at the start, 23rd at the bottom. And he is a team of one, so anybody that's helping, Martin Rettel, the Austrian coach there, is doing so to help out the smaller nations, but you hear his reaction there, disappointed with that run.
Yeah, he's talking about corner 8. Too much height, comes off too early and hits almost on the little corner of that short wall, pushes him late into corner 9, skidding his sled to control that height. You want to have that nice profile, but he dug himself a hole in the belly of that curve. All the pressure is coming back at him at the end.
When you look at it in super slow-mo, I say, well, how come he couldn't react to that in time? And the answer is he's doing 70 miles an hour. That's why, you know, trying to react within a meter or so, you know, you're on the wrong line. That makes life very difficult indeed. Next up, Mattia Gaspari, our second Italian slider on the ice today. 27th of our 28 starters. And already, unfortunately, his teammate Joe Cecchini has failed to make the cut to break into the fast 20. Little bing-bong sounds at the top to tell him that his 30-second start window has started. Just above the track, you can see the green light and the countdown clock. And it's very unusual that anybody needs to refer to the clock, Melissa Hollingsworth, because you have your own little internal monologue, your own routine, and you go when you go.
You go when you go, but ideally you want to go as soon as possible, because if something happens on that start line where you push out of the groove and you haven't triggered the start line, you have the opportunity to pull your sled back to the block, reset, and go again. But you only have the 30 seconds, and that start is 10 meters from the starting block. So you want to make sure that as soon as that the track is cleared for you, you go in case something bad happens.
Mattia, 23rd at the start, slipped into 24th place now behind Ander Mirambel of Spain. Just 100th ahead of Alexandros Kefalas on pace. If he can keep that up, he might be into the 20. Kefalas is in 20th place. 118.2, up to 23rd. He needs a little more at the bottom if he's going to break into the race, and I don't think he's got it in the tank. He doesn't. 24th place for him. Well, when we start, effectively in seeding order of your season's performance. The top 10 are random draw, but still everybody else goes in that order. Then the guys who start down 15 and below are less likely to be the outright fast performers.
He got really far away from his sled as he was coming over the crest, so he's putting a lot of weight on that saddle and in that groove and a lot of force to the side and not forwards. That's how you gain your velocity, is when you're square, running straight, everything going forward.
The ideal would be to be running along behind it and then throw yourself on, but it doesn't seem to be as quick as running alongside it.
Not in the bent over position. When you're standing upright, that's more natural, obviously, but bent over, you can't get that extension and that reach.
Martin Stuckos of Latvia, our race leader. One slider left to go. Lucas Kummer of Switzerland has not made the cut. Let's see if Yves-Pascal Oswald can get into this race. And for so many sliders, Igls here will be the final chance to earn any points that will count for Olympic qualifications, Olympic start draw positions. I don't know if Yves-Pascal is even in the frame for a Swiss spot. 5:33, and I'm afraid that is pretty much going to seal his fate. If he makes the race from a 5:33 start, then he will be doing very well indeed.
I'm sure Pascal hasn't had the time to work on his start because he is a lawyer. He spent many years studying and now works in that profession.
Was injured as well over the Christmas break and missed out on the Winterberg race just to recover a little bit and recoup his strength. 27th place. So Alexandros Kefalas got into 20th off a start that was 100 slower for Greece. But his compatriot, because Kefalas lives in Switzerland like Oswald, can't make it in at 26th position, just in front of Joe Cicchini and Ben Sanford. And a long way from making the race on the plane. He needed to find an extra 0.6 of a second. Oh, and to add insult to injury, or perhaps the other way round. Well, he's smiling inside somewhere, isn't he?
At least he can laugh at himself.
Well, Melissa, this was a scary moment for you and for him.
Yeah, a bit too late and flying out. That's typical down in that lower labyrinth if you're not having the high point in the spoon of the corner, as Willy Schneider taught us many, many years ago.
Well, that may be the only way to deal with a run like that, is to laugh it off and move on. All 28 of our first heat sliders have made it down successfully here in Igls, but the fastest was Martin Stuckos. He leads, but by just 0.04 of a second. He keeps his hopes of the €100,000 triple prize going, triple trophy prize going, as he has now led all 3 heats that have counted so far. He's got to lead again and win with the fastest run to keep that going into Koenigsee next week. Alexander Tretyakov of Russia just 0.04 of a second behind him. Nothing is guaranteed, and that is the way we like it. We've got a real race on our hands for the win. John Daly leads the peloton, but look how close the next 3 guys are. 0.04 of a second cover them, and insanely tight groups behind. Big day for John Montgomery so far. 8th spot for him, 6th for Johnny Fairbairn, the Canadians going strongly. And ties all the way down the top 20, which finishes at Alexandros Kefalas of Greece. He will be the last of our athletes who does get a second slide. There's Jarnel's mum and dad down there, watched her slide to gold yesterday. Who are we going to watch slide to gold today? Join Melissa Hollingsworth and me, Martin Haven, for our second and deciding run coming up in Igls in Austria.